So in this next part, we will be going and check out what, well, let's say a little bit more generic update management using Microsoft Intune. Now, when it comes to Windows, you may have been working with solutions like Windows Server Update Services or System Center Configuration Manager. And if you use those kind of solutions, then you are pretty much used to being able to take control on updates, which means that you have the ability to choose which exact update to install or which exact update to not install, and also to what device. Um, well, Microsoft changed its philosophy a little bit. Microsoft now pretty much refers to Windows as a service kind of solution. So Microsoft actually has the acronym WAS for Windows as a Service. This means Microsoft is pretty much taking the let us handle updates approach, um, which for some people might be a little bit scary, might give you a little nightmares as well. Maybe in the past you have been dealing with updates that have been breaking things. Well, it is what it is. In Intune, Microsoft takes this approach. So, well, if you would look at what Microsoft allows you to do managing updates, you can go into devices here. Then if you scroll a little bit further down, you have options to set up the update rings for Windows 10 and later. Microsoft also tried to fix stuff with feature updates and quality updates, but that doesn't really work well, or at least I haven't seen it used a lot. If you want to manage updates for Windows, then you could go and create an update ring policy. It allows you to choose a little bit. As you can see, this is everything. These are all the settings that you can do when it comes to managing those updates. Now, if you check this out here, then, well, we have options to get updates for, well, other Microsoft products than Windows. You could block this or allow this, like updates for drivers for your device using Microsoft, using the update environment. And then the only control we have is to tell how long we want to defer or wait before we are going to allow updates to be installed. You have two options: quality updates, which used to be like security updates and critical updates, and feature updates. And what you could choose to do is go and just go ahead and install updates straight away. However, it may be a little bit safer for your production environment if you, for example, would wait 7 days or maybe 14 days before updates would be installed. The idea behind this is that if there is an update that breaks stuff in your environment, then at least have the rest of the world get it broken first, give Microsoft the opportunity to fix it, and then you are going to install the fixed version of an update. The maximum value for quality updates is 30 days. If you go one step beyond that, then you're not allowed to go any further. So one of the things that you would maybe want to do is go and say, oh, you know what? Maybe for my test computers, for some pilot devices, I'm going to push some updates straight away. And maybe for another group of devices, you could create another update ring that would say, hey, and for those devices, we're going to wait 7 days, for example. You could pretty much do the same thing for feature updates, like any other updates. And the maximum deferral period here is 360 days. If you want to go one step beyond that, you're not allowed to go. So 365 days deferral period at maximum for your feature updates. You could also choose to upgrade Windows 10 devices to Windows 11, like this. I would say, why not? You could allow users to uninstall feature updates within 10 days after installation. There is a value of 2 and 60 days as minimum and maximum. maybe you want to try and play a little bit with the developer updates of Windows. For example, the dev channel gets you the earliest adoption program for Windows. Of course, this is not production, so maybe this is something you just want to deploy to well, people or devices in your organization to verify if some features are worth waiting for. We choose this one. And then the rest of the settings is all about the user experience. So in here, you can just go and say, okay, when to install, do some restart checking, or do we allow the user to pause updates or to check for updates, or you can do some restart checks as well. You can even set up a deadline which say, hey, you know what? Okay, we have waited for 7 days or maybe 14 days when it comes to certain updates. However, when we release them, I want you to install it within a day. When it comes to feature updates, I want you to install it straight away when it's a quality update. And there could be a grace period of, let's say, 3 days that says, hey, if this is the minimum number of days after the deadline until the computer will actually restart. That is something we can configure as well. So here we have a couple of settings, and that is what we can do. So in Windows, let us handle the updates part. Well, on one hand, we can work with those update rings to make sure that we are in control on when updates are going to be installed. There is actually something else here as well. We have update rings as a solution. However, Microsoft also has released or has fixed something the last year, which is called a Windows Auto Patch. Now, Windows Auto Patch is a solution where Microsoft takes even greater control on how and when updates are going to be installed. Now, auto patch is something that you would need to separately enable. So if you want to make use of it, you need to be in your tenant administration. Here in, and I always look for it and I can never find it. So I have to do some checking. You know what? Let's just check this environment here. Because I'm pretty sure I will be able to find it, weirdly enough, in this tenant easier, because in this tenant it has not yet been enabled. In my own tenant, I have already enabled auto patch. Quite happy with it. So let me just go in and check. Now, always this is super annoying. In connectors and tokens, there is no auto patch here, weirdly enough. I have to be in tenant administration, so just let's go and check this one out. Here we are in Intune. This is portal here. I want to go into tenant administration here, and then if I scroll down here, we can see Windows Auto Patch. Windows Auto Patch. If you go in here, you have to go and sort of agree to, having Microsoft check your environment for auto patch readiness. They can say here, hey, there are some reasons. You have the license, so everything is all right. For code management, which means that if devices are managed with Intune as well as System Center Configuration Manager or Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, then you will have to do something special. But more than that, your environment is ready for auto patch. We could enroll for auto patch. And once you enroll for auto patch, what will happen is that Microsoft is then going to create all kinds of components in your environment to manage updates for you. So even more, we could actually go and here and say, let us, Microsoft, handle even more for you. The idea of what is being handled is that, for example, if you enable Windows Auto Patch in devices and in those update rings, Microsoft is going to create update rings for you, and they have different deferral periods for those update rings. All of those update rings, they are assigned to a certain group. Here we have, for example, a group created, Microsoft Workplace Devices, Windows Auto Patch Fast. Fast means that devices will get updates in 6 days, for example. There is a deadline setting. I did not create this myself. Microsoft creates these objects for you. Next to this, just let's open up the Entra portal here. For example, Microsoft will also create in your Azure Active Directory a group, something with Modern Workplace, something with Windows Auto Patch, Test, First, Fast and Broad, 0-day update referral, 1 day, 6 days and 9 days. So if you have a device that is a member of these groups, then they will be getting those update links. But it doesn't end here. For example, if I check out my configuration profiles here, then also the configuration profiles down in the list here, everything with auto patch are also created by Microsoft. For example, it will update Microsoft Edge, it will update Office clients, it will make sure that MDM wins over group policy, it does some data collection for the use of updates. This is also being created for me by Microsoft in order to make sure that my updates are being deployed nicely. So Windows Auto Patch is the let us handle even more option. And then thirdly, because if you think this was all, there is more. Microsoft also has something called the Microsoft Managed Desktop. And well, when we think about Microsoft Managed Desktop, you could say that Microsoft says, well, you know what? Just let us handle pretty much everything. In this case, the let us handle pretty much everything means that Microsoft will not only manage Windows and updates, it also will monitor your devices, and it will monitor if weird things will be going on, and it will solve those problems as well. Before we talked about remediations, where Microsoft would have those detection scripts for stalling group policies or click to run issues, and also remediation scripts. Well, Microsoft will, in Microsoft Managed Desktop, they will not only manage updates, which is obviously an important part. They will also manage, let's say this is updates for Windows that they manage. They do updates for Office and Microsoft Edge as well. They will also enable Windows health monitoring, which is something you can do manually as well, by the way. But hey, you can enable it. But Microsoft will monitor the data, and they will enable remediations if necessary. So Microsoft is going to handle pretty much everything for your devices. Now, getting access to the Microsoft Managed Desktop is a little bit more work than Windows Auto Patch. Here in Tenant Administration under Microsoft Managed Desktop, you can choose Tenant Enrollment. It can then, for you, monitor your environment, check if your environment is ready for Microsoft Managed Desktop. A couple of things that we have to go and fix here, some advisories, but there's also a lot of stuff that is okay here. So we have to fix a couple of things. And once everything is all right, you will then have to connect to Microsoft, or Microsoft have to become eligible for Microsoft Managed Desktop. So this is a different kind of agreement that you will have with Microsoft. But if you're interested, it is something that you could enable for in your environment for Intune as well. So, well, when we think about Windows, Microsoft now thinks about Windows as a service. Therefore, you can, well, you can take, well, at least a little bit of control. Microsoft can take a little bit more, or a little bit more as well. In the end, the goal obviously is to make sure that you have your computers healthy and up to date. One of the components that you might like to check out is Windows Health Monitoring. If you want to enable it using Intune, you can actually go in, create a configuration profile. So for example, I can choose here to create a Windows 10 all the way down in templates. Yeah, all the way down in templates. I can create a Windows Health Monitoring configuration profile. So let's go and say, hey, Win all, and then I can do Health Monitor. Health Monitor. Then I'm going to click Next. We can enable Windows Health Monitoring. We can do this for Windows Updates and Endpoint Analytics. Now with Windows Updates, it's going to give us some reports and information about the level of updates that machines have. And with Endpoint Analytics, it will not only monitor updates, but it will also monitor, for example, how fast or how slow Windows boots and what process is going to is slowing down the startup procedure for Windows, or if applications are crashing too often, it will tell us which applications crash, or if we get Windows, well, we don't get any blue screens anymore, but let's say failures in Windows will also be written down, and we can see reports and see why and how often, and we can compare, for example, Dell versus HP or different Dell models against each other. So I'm gonna enable this for all devices. Again, I'm not a fan of all devices, but in some cases I know that I want to do things at all devices. In that case, you may want to enable that as well. I'm gonna allow this for any operating system and just create that policy. The result is I'm not able to show you all of it, but for example, if I take a device here where I have sort of enabled these things, then in the user experience for that device, you could, for example, see the endpoint analytics score based on startup performance, based on the work from anywhere performance, based on the timeline of the device, which will show all kinds of well, events that happen on the device. So with that, that is basically what you get out of that. Typically, it takes a little while before the data is being gathered and populated, but it's actually quite an interesting view, which will get us some extra information about the devices that we have. In the report section here, we also have a report for endpoint analytics here, just to give you an idea what kind of data to expect. You will get an endpoint analytics overview or a score here. It will give us information about startup, application reliability, work from anywhere capabilities, which is about, well, if the device is managed in the cloud, if the user is managed in the cloud, and so on. It will show any anomalies that we find in the organization. We can compare different models of devices, like Dell and Dell Latitude stuff, or I don't know, the HP EliteBook stuff. You can check this out per device as well. You get reports on startup performance. You can report on application reliability, and we can compare devices and models against each other. We can compare operating systems against each other. The work from anywhere check. So this means, is Windows managed? Is it a cloud-based identity? Is it managed in the cloud? Is it provisioned via the cloud? And also, it shows, for example, the proactive remediation. So we could go in and say, hey, what if we want those script packages that we talked about earlier, also B2B here? we can also monitor and get those. So that, the help monitoring is actually quite a nice extra solution if you want to be well, checking what is going on those devices.
How sensitive?
Um,
Personal information, or is it?
no, no, the information is not personal, but it's just it is just about the operating system. So it might be a certain process that blocks the device to boot fast, for example, or an application may crash. Now, if let's say a personal application crashes that you may not want anyone to know about that you are using the app. I can imagine some apps they reveal a little bit of your, let's say, of your sexual preferences maybe. Then I can imagine that would be well, sensitive. But it's not that detailed. It's just it shows, hey, how many apps do we crash? How often do devices reboot? What is the reason for a reboot? That is pretty much what you get to see out of it. I think we have, yes. Yeah. So it would give us some nice extras here. Oh, before I forget, um, in Windows Auto Patch, devices are not per se automatically added into Windows Auto Patch. In order to enable Windows Auto Patch for your environment, you will actually have to put devices into the Auto Patch device registration group first. If devices are in the Auto Patch device registration group, then in Intune, if you go to the Auto Patch area here, and my case, oh, here it is. So you can check out my devices here. So these devices I have put into that Auto Patch device registration group. And then one of the things I can do is choose to go and say, hey, this device needs to be in the first group, and this device I may want to assign to another device group. For example, I can say, hey, this one needs to be in the, I don't know, let's say in the fast group here. And then I will be changing the group membership from broad to fast. It takes a little while before this is all being changed because it uses Azure Active Directory in the back. And then we'll see those changes happening.
So it's not possible with the dynamic.
Well, you could do it dynamically. You could, for example, check out this group here, Windows Auto Patch device registration. If I check the group here, you can see that the membership is assigned, but you may want to change this to dynamic device and then add all devices in there automatically, right? That is something you could do. Yeah, that's an option. So yeah, we get updates for Windows. Now these are pretty much the Windows options. For other operating systems, you can see that down here. Whoa, that is not what I wanted. For other operating systems, we can see that down here we also have update policies for iOS, iPadOS, and macOS. For example, for iOS and iPad OS, you can just go and create a profile. But as you can see, the settings, well, there is almost no settings, right? It's just like, hey, always install the latest update, right? Doesn't matter which one, but install the latest. And the schedule type is at next check-in, for example, or during a scheduled time that we can set up, for example. This is it. And the same thing if you go for macOS, we can create a macOS update policy, and this gives us, well, pretty much the same solution. Here we have some updates. Install it whenever ready, right? That we can have some options in what the user would notice about this. Again, if an iOS or a macOS device is supervised, then you will get some more control. For example, if a macOS device or iOS device is supervised, you can also choose to not allow updates to be installed or to set up a deferral period as well. But that would be a policy instead of a update settings. For yes, yes, it's well, you can try to assign it to any device, but it will only work for supervised devices. And for Android, the only thing we have is the FOTA deployments, firmware over the air. Yes, this is a new acronym for today. I do not have a connector to get it going. You need a special connector to a manufacturer, but this could allow you to get a firmware over the air solution. So this allows us to deploy firmware. Well, when it comes to updates, this is basically it in Intune. For if you want more control, then you may need to stick with Windows Server Update Services or Config Manager. Also, if you need control for updates on servers, then Intune is also not going to help you. Now I can imagine that that you could start questioning, like, okay, so we created an update ring here for well, we create update rings for Windows. Sometimes I can imagine that we'd say, okay, so how important are these updates for me, for my organization? And well, one of the things that you might like to check out is, and that is also something that we will be covering in way more detail in one of our next sessions, and that is Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So in my environment, I am running Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. I have some devices that are now here connected to Defender for Endpoint. If you check out one of those devices, let's say I want to check out my daughter's computer here, then Microsoft Defender for Endpoint has one very nice feature, and that is the software inventory. If you check out the software inventory for this machine, you'll see that it will show all the software that has been found on that device. Now you could say, hey, but in Intune we have the same option. If I go to the same device in Intune laptop Jolie, which is my daughter, I can also check discovered applications, and it shows indeed information about apps. But just to give you a little check here, if I would search in here for the word Adobe, then you'll see that I have Adobe mentioned only one. Now you could say, oh yeah, sometimes applications are called Photoshop, for example, cannot find it, or Illustrator, it's not listed here. However, if I check this device here, and I scroll a little bit further down, I have Acrobat Reader. Okay, we have Photoshop, we have Illustrator, we have InDesign, we have Creative Cloud, all kinds of Adobe stuff. The software inventory for Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is way better than the software inventory for Intune. Plus, and that is the nice part here, if there is a software version found, for example, Zoom meetings or OpenSSL, it can not only check out the version, but it also knows how many weaknesses those versions will have. So Zoom Meetings 571 has 18 weaknesses. What weaknesses, you might ask? Well, here is the list of discovered vulnerabilities on that device. Now, obviously, if Windows is not updated, you will see a shitload on those on those vulnerabilities here. It will not only tell you how bad things are, 10 is the worst score you can get. So here we have quite a serious one in the top. You can even go in there and it will explain what is going on. And it has a security recommendation. Well, I can tell you what that security recommendation is going to be. Please update Zoom meetings and OpenSSL, because, well, that would really, really help. So with that, so Intune can help us understand or deploy those updates. This is what we can do with Intune. But if we think about the same thing, if we think about update, whoa, this is way too big, and I want to make it look nice. You know me, I'm a geek, I want this. Update management in or using Microsoft Defender for Endpoint will give us way more information. It will tell us about Windows, it will tell us about Microsoft apps, but also it will tell us about third-party apps. And it will not only tell us the version that we have, but it will also show us the vulnerabilities, which is obviously interesting stuff. Now I was hoping to get that list of recommendations for this device. Please show me the recommendation. That would be so nice. But those recommendations, they will tell us, or maybe here in the overall recommendation list, which will give us pretty much the same set of recommendations. It will tell us that I may want to here go and update Zoom meetings. And I want to update Zoom meetings because I have 18 weaknesses and there's actually 2 devices that need that update. Or for example, update Windows 10 because, well, we have one device here that has 130 weaknesses and the device is probably my son's. Oh no, that's not my son's. Okay, this is something else. So then we can actually see which computers have Windows 10, which is exposed to all those vulnerabilities. So not only do we get to see what we are running, but we also see why it is so important to get those updates. Microsoft Defender for Endpoint also works for Windows Server. Aha. So it will show us, for example, which Windows Server machine needs those updates. And here we see the list of vulnerabilities for that machine. And if I need more info, I can click the info on the vulnerability and the related software, and everything is here. So yes, very, very, very useful extra info that we can get out of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint when it comes to updates. Now, Microsoft Defender for Endpoint is not going to manage the updates for us. It's not going to deploy the updates for us. It is going to tell us why these updates are so important. And then because we now know, we can configure Intune accordingly to make sure that the updates are being deployed in the end. So with that, we have the full info on managing those updates.